It seems that there's finally a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the development and administration of a vaccine against the COVID-19 virus, with multiple research centres finally in the latter stages of producing a viable and effective vaccine against the virus. However, while so close to the end, is the decision by the British to roll out the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine a little too soon. Already the British and the US have been arguing about the timing of the promise to start inoculating the most vulnerable groups of people in the UK by as early as this coming Monday, with the US criticising the British either due to the early release of a yet untested product, or maybe through jealousy of being pipped to the post by the Brits. With the UK having the worst rates in Europe, with already 60,000 people dead from the virus, the US is also in a difficult situation, with around 1,500 people dying each day and already 276,000 people having succumbed to the coronavirus in America. Embarrassing figures for the outgoing President of the United States, who would have no doubt enjoyed being the first to distribute the vaccine. So why then are the British and Americans fighting over the issue?
Well, the United Kingdom government has considerable criticism from a number of countries, including the United States, by really turning the launch of the vaccine into an act of nationalism, claiming that Britain is leading the way and that therefore trying to hide also the fact, of course, that Britain has had more COVID deaths than any other country in Europe. And America was one of the countries to criticize this so-called COVID nationalism, particularly Dr. Anthony Fauci from the National Allergy and Infectious Disease Center, though subsequently he has apologized and accepted that, yes, it could undermine public faith and therefore it's maybe not a good idea to engage in slinging.
With the British choosing to start with the order of 40 million Pfizer BioNTech vaccines, it seems odd that they have chosen a vaccine developed outside of the UK. Yet when one examines the effectiveness of the vaccines available, the British version, developed by Oxford University and AstraZeneca, is only around 62% effective. Hence maybe why the British have rushed ahead with the German-US version, quicker than the Americans and the Germans themselves. So could the tension then come from the attitude of the British when it comes to wanting to get the vaccine out as quickly as possible, rushing it through the regulators at such a pace? British Education Minister Gavin Williamson clearly flared tempers with his attitude towards the US and the EU when he stated that were obviously better, and then going one step further, saying the whole of the UK was better than the US and the EU. Clearly a diplomatic flop by publicly stating such words. What now remains to be seen is A, just how realistic the monumental task of distributing a vaccine that needs to be kept at -70 degrees will be, and B, will the US show any sympathy towards the UK should the process fail, and as Britain comes crashing out of the EU, looking at the US for a future trade deal.
The war of words does not end with the spat between the UK and the US. The EU has also been drawn into the battle arena over the COVID-19 vaccine, but with London still struggling to secure a post-Brexit trade deal with Brussels. The timing of the vaccine rollout simply a dig at the Europeans. The EU will require the European Medicines Agency to fully approve the vaccine before the bloc can receive the much-needed doses. But with the UK now potentially out of the EU, could such choices by the British confirm their newfound sovereignty, much to the annoyance of the Europeans? Furthermore, has the COVID-19 vaccine distribution taken a political turn? Take a look, please.
Britain is against the ropes when it comes to the Brexit negotiations with the EU. However, the announcement that the British will have the vaccine out on Monday is something that the British negotiating team will secretly be as talks reach a stalemate in London. But the EU, with all its red tape, bureaucracy and processes, has yet to fully approve any developed vaccine so far, and has taken the opportunity to criticise the UK for a hasty decision when it comes to announcing the vaccine will be available to various groups within Britain. Until the European Medicines Agency approves the vaccine, the rest of the continent will have to remain patient. However, there are arguments that the EMA is more rigorous than the British, leading the Germans to label the move by the British as problematic. But the UK may have one valid point when it comes to the rollout. If the vaccine is truly over 95% effective and it can save lives, then what's wrong with the British taking such a step?
Well, the British medical regulator unusually doing its tests while the vaccine was still at various stages of production, and that's the reason that they were able to get ahead of the other countries. And this has rather annoyed the European Union because the EU has been trying to have a united front to do things together, to pool resources, and the Germans in particular have a very strict set of regulations which they feel that the British have not really complied with.
With the British finding themselves stuck in a desperate situation when it comes to agreeing a deal with the EU in the post-Brexit era, and time fast running out before the deadline approaches to switch to WTO rules, could then the decision by the British to start distribution be a final dig at the EU? That by no longer being part of the bloc, it can take such decisions without fallout that would have emerged from Brussels should they still have been members. But the truth of the matter is simple. This is one of the world's worst cases of a global pandemic, at least in modern times, and the economic impact, as well as the devastating cost of life, has left a scar and legacy that will never be forgotten. So whether it be Pfizer BioNTech, AstraZeneca, Moderna or Gamaleya, and whether it's the UK, the US or the EU, or in fact any other country that starts the vaccine first, at the end of the day, this is a humanitarian issue, and when the time comes, the whole world will need the doses eventually.